If you're looking for great and varied exclusives that deliver strong and rather emotional stories, then look no further than PlayStation. Throughout the PS3 years and all throughout the PS4 days, Sony and their selection of first and second party studios have been delivering some of the best video games of this generation, all delivering memorable experiences and characters. And the latest of these PS4 exclusives is Days Gone, an open-world zombie action game that tries to fill the void whilst we wait for The Last of Us 2. Days Gone is developed by Sony Bend Studios, the same guys from the PlayStation classic Siphon Filter series. In recent years, the developer has been primarily developing handheld titles for the PSP and the Vita, and Days Gone marks the first home console game the studios created for quite a long time. So let's see how they did, shall we? Days Gone is set in a post-apocalyptic world a few years after a zombie outbreak, and we follow a biker called Deacon St. John, a gruff-talking, no-nonsense sort of guy who travels around the world with his mate Boozer as they try to survive. When we first meet Deacon, he does seem a bit of a bland and rather typical rough and gruff sort of lead that many gamers seem to have these days. Thankfully, Deacon really does flesh out throughout the game, thanks to his backstory of what happened to his beloved wife Sarah. At the start of the game, we see that she is gravely injured at the time of when the zombie crap happened, and she's carried away by a helicopter to a health camp, which is apparently went down by the zombies too. But without any closure, Deacon is dead set on trying to find out what happened to her, and grief is the main reason why Deacon is the way he is. But he does mellow out throughout the game, especially when he stumbles upon a young female who reminds him of Sarah's younger sister. As for the supporting cast, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Learning about Sarah and her past with Deacon is really interesting, and Boozer is a likeable dude too. Other main characters and leader of various camps are decent enough, but I'd like if they were a bit more fleshed out and had a bit more depth. The game's storyline is set up with several overarching plot lines, like Deacon and his relationship to Sarah, and his and Boots's journey. But one of the more interesting plot points is the Nero researchers who travel around Oregon and gives you an insight on what really went down with this zombie apocalypse. The game's open world is set in the northwest state of Oregon, and damn, it's a beautiful looking world to explore. From the lush forests to snowy mountains, Oregon is really a star in its own right and a thing of beauty to behold. For the actual gameplay, it's your typical open world action game that includes your selection of main story missions, side missions, various side activities, and collectibles to keep you busy. Main missions take Deacon all over Oregon. You'll be tracking folks down, doing loads of fetch quests, hunting bounties, and a few full stealth sections as well, which can be a bit iffy, those stealth sections. For the majority of the game, however, you'll be doing fetch quests and hunting down some evil people. And whilst this may be a bit repetitive for some, each encounter is a joy to play, mainly thanks to the punchy combat. The combat is your typical third-person action game. Even though the game is set in the middle of the apocalypse, there's a decent amount of weapons out there to use. Early on in the game, gunplay can feel a little bit off, but thankfully once you upgrade Deacon and find better weapons, shooting is great. It's not just with your gun you can dispatch enemies, as there's a decent stealth mechanic available here, and taking down enemies one by one in complete silence is just as much fun as gunning them down. The game's melee combat is also really enjoyable, and you can pick up random items and smack enemies to death. Every time you use a melee item, it weakens every time you use it until it breaks. A nice addition is that you can craft more powerful weapons that can do devastating damage to opponents, and they're real flashy to put off. Crafting in the game is similar to other games of its ilk like The Last of Us and Far Cry. You can pick up various bits and bobs which you can craft health items, traps, ranged weapons like molotovs. Crafting is a big part of the game, and thankfully items are generously spread out so you haven't got to do too much wandering, which is great. A heavily marketed part of Days Gone is the motorbike that Deacon uses throughout the game. It's a vital lifeline for you to use if you want to survive the deadly land. When you first start off the game, your bike is fully kitted out. Well, that's until it's nicked and you have to start from scratch again. Your bike starts off a bit slow and unreliable, but thankfully with a few upgrades you'll be speeding, drifting and boosting around the wasteland, no problem. was a bit worried that the motorbike wouldn't handle that well, but thankfully it's a joy to ride throughout. And whilst you may bang into the walls and fall off the bike sometimes, it's due to your mistakes than anything else. Your bike will require resources, it burns more fuel on a small trip than a lorry, and if you smack up your bike too much, you must fix it with scrap, which thankfully is easily enough around the world. And thankfully, with a few upgrades, you don't have to worry about filling up or fixing too often. As for the threats in the world, there's plenty of them hoping to cause you a lot of trouble, ranging from human enemies to rippers, which are like crazed maniacs from the Mad Max films. Then there are zombies, or should I say freaks, as that's what the game likes to call them. Surprisingly, there's a decent variety of freaks on offer, from normal ones to children to screamers, which alerts all freaks to your area. There's also some other types of freaks in the game, but I won't spoil that for you, but there is a good selection throughout. But without doubt the greatest threat on the open road of Oregon is the freak hordes. The heavily marketed feature and one of the game's biggest selling points, the hordes are truly something to behold. The game's world is littered with hordes to kill, and the size of these hordes range from around 80 all the way up to the late hundreds. It's seriously impressive in motion. If you try to take down a horde in the early parts of the game, you'll be dead as soon as you face them. But thankfully, once you get a few more powerful weapons, you should be fine. Taking down hordes is a puzzle in itself, as you have to manage your ammo whilst taking advantage of the environment to offer a few extra freaks. All these freaks are shown on the screen, and thankfully the frame rate does stick pretty solid with all the action going on. If you're wondering how long Days Gone will take you to complete, well, you're talking about a real lengthy experience. To reach the game's credits, just focusing on the story, then you're talking about a good 30 to 40 hours to complete. But if you're looking to complete all the side missions and open world activities, then you're talking about 60 to 70 hours. It's an incredibly lengthy game that will provide you with a lot of bang for your buck. And Ben Studios has recently stated that in a couple of months' time, there'll be in-game challenges and events to complete which you can earn some in-game items and bike skins. It's a nice little addition to the game that will add some legs to the game for those who have already completed it. As for the game's presentation, we're looking at a game that was announced all the way back at the PS4 Pro reveal at E3 2016, and the game was one of the flagship titles, and now finally in the hands of the gamers, it's honestly one of the most graphically impressive titles on the PS4 and PS4 Pro. Days Gone is astounding on whatever console you play it on. Character models are detailed and the open world of Oregon is beautiful. Easily one of the most impressive things about the presentation is the dynamic weather, which shows some lovely sun rays, real boggy rain showers, and some wonderful snow effects. Alas, for as much as Days Gone is a visual powerhouse for the PS4, it's also one of the most glitchiest games out there. From texture popping, frame rate issues, pausing issues, and crashing, it's certainly a very buggy game, especially for a first party title, which normally should be free of this sort of stuff. The game also suffers from some incredibly lengthy loading times, from a hefty one to get to the title screen to even a longer one to get into the game. It wouldn't be that bad if there wasn't any loading screens once you're in the game, but alas they're littered throughout cutscenes as well, which does take it out of the action. Even with an 18GB worth of patches, there's still issues, but hopefully Ben Studios will sort out these issues in the next few weeks. One thing I haven't heard many reviewers talk about, and that is the game's soundtrack, which is absolutely wonderful. The game main theme is superbly made, and it does kind of remind me a bit of the Last of Us soundtrack. The game even has a track with vocals called Why We Fight that plays out during a long bike ride throughout Oregon. Rockstar did a similar move with Red Dead Redemption 2, and it works well here. Conclusion time now, and whilst Days Gone may not have been a big hit with many of the critics, I have to admit I was pleasantly surprised by the game. What we have here is an incredibly enjoyable open world experience with a beautiful open world full of things to do and explore. Yes, the game may be a tad repetitive, but I didn't mind it due to the fact that the game's combat is such a lot of fun. Days Gone does borrow a lot from a lot of the great games of this generation, and it's easily one of the best, if not the best looking titles on the PS4. It's just a shame about those technical issues that do plague it so much. So that's why, at the moment, I'm giving Days Gone an 8 out of 10 with the title of great. It would be an 8.5 or a 9, but technical issues do let it down so much. So if they sort it out, then I can re-review it. But anyway, thank you for watching my review. Like, rate, and subscribe. And until next time, happy gaming. Bye.